Hi, this is Freckles and this is my first strategy guide. In this guide I'll be covering the Morchok Heroic encounter in the Dragon Soul raid instance. I'll try to cover the basic mechanics as well as some more healing and Holy Paladin specific tips and tricks. In the heroic version of the encounter, Morchok will split into two. He creates an identical copy of himself. To deal with this, you have to split the raid into two teams, with one tank and 3 to 4 healers in each team. We found it was easiest to treat the two teams as independent raids. We used two different channels on TeamSpeak so we wouldn't have to listen to what the other team was doing. It made it a lot easier to coordinate movement and to call out for cooldowns and so on. When Morchok splits into two, have your tanks pick up one copy each and move them away from each other. They have to be kept apart so that the damage from one side doesn't reach the players on the other side. Morchok will stomp and his copy will mimic the ability a few seconds later. When Morchok or his copy stomps the ground, he will deal AoE damage split between everyone within 25 yards. It's important everyone stacks up to share this damage. The more the raid stacks up, the easier it gets for the healers. For example, Holy Radiance only has a 10-yard range from the target now. We tried to stack up as close together as we could to maximize the AoE healing and the healing from Holy Radiance. He also applies a debuff to the two closest players, making them take double damage. This will be the tank and 1 DPS, preferably a melee with high armor using some defensive cooldowns. We had 2 rogues for this, using the feint ability to take 50% less damage. I recommend using rogues because feint has such a short cooldown they can easily soak every stomp themselves. But it's also possible to use a rotation of, for example, fire mages with quarter eyes or paladins with divine protection. You can also help out with hand of protection from a paladin if they run out of cooldowns. If you need to move the boss, be careful not to run him over the raid, as this might cause someone else to be the closest player. If this happens, the next stomp will likely kill them. The tanks will need to use a cooldown for every stomp. Help out with Hand of Sacrifice from a Paladin or Guardian Spirit from a Holy Priest if the tank runs out of cooldowns. I used Hand of Sacrifice on the tank twice in this video and the priest used his cooldown as well. We used 7 healers in our first kill, but it can definitely be done with 6. We got 1 extra healer in because one of our teams was struggling with keeping their tank alive. Tank damage in this fight is insane. DPS was not a problem for us, so we could afford to use 1 more healer. Keep the cooldowns and buffs in mind when splitting up the 2 teams. Try to split them evenly. As a Holy Paladin, I position myself slightly behind the raid. I use Holy Radiance to heal the raid up between the stomps. I try to put it on the rogue, taking the extra damage. I use Holy Shock on the tank to gain holy power along with some single target heals to keep the tank alive. At 3 holy power I use Light of Dawn to heal people up after the stomps. If you're spec'd into Blessed Life, you can also get extra holy power from the stomps. This fight is good for Holy Paladins because you can stun within melee range and keep hitting the boss to regen more mana, and you can use Crusader Strike for extra holy power. Apart from the tank damage, the stomps themselves are not that dangerous. It is the crystals that spawn right after that is likely to kill people if they're not healed up fast enough. A red crystal will spawn and a few seconds later it will explode and deal damage to the 7 closest players. It will deal more damage the further away you are, that's why it's important you run and stack on it when it explodes. We try to keep the boss tanked in the same position the whole time and moved him as little as possible. This way the crystal will always spawn in the same place, right behind the raid. When you run to the crystal, try to stay on this side of it, because then when it explodes you'll get knocked back towards the boss and it saves you a lot of running. The most important thing is that everyone stays and shares the damage from the stomp before they run out. You'll get a stomp and then a crystal right after. Wait for the stomp, then run to the crystal and then run back to share the damage from the next stomp. There is not much to say about the Black Blood phase, just run out and hide behind the pillars. There shouldn't be much healing required in this phase. Everyone should try to run in the same direction. You don't have to run in the same direction, but it makes it easier. Decide beforehand which direction to run. Either set up a world marker on the ground or put a raid marker on a player for everyone to follow. Heal up the raid if they're low or if anyone is taking damage from the Black Blood. Remember, the pillars block line of sight. Make sure you set up a cooldown rotation for every crystal explosion. My team had Aura Mastery, healing him and Tranquility from the healers. We also had an Unholy Death Knight with Anti-Magic Zone. Other cooldowns will work just as well, for example Powered Barrier from a Disc Priest, Spiritling Totem from a Shaman, or Divine Guardian from a Protection Paladin, and so on. Just work with a combination of cooldowns you got in your raid. Aura Mastery will help reduce the damage from the crystals because it's shadow damage, so Resistance Aura with Aura Mastery is great for the crystal explosions but useless on the stomps. The way we dealt with the crystals was we had everyone except the tank and the healers soak the damage. In other words, all our DPS ran. You can also change it so you have the healers running instead and the melee staying on the boss DPS. When the druids use Tranquility, they need to stay by the boss channeling. Have your druids call out when they trank so one of the healers can take their spot and run to the crystal instead of them. Here we lost our tank, but he was rested quite fast inside the Black Blood. He was saved by a priest to leap them out. I was also a bit slow on moving out, so I had to use my Divine Protection to sprint. You can use your Divine Protection on the stomps if you want, but I would save it for sprinting out of the Black Blood. I tried to judge just before I ran out to make sure my judgment of the pure doesn't rub off. If it rubs off in this phase, you'll be too far away from the boss to be able to re-judge, and you'll lose a lot of mana regeneration. So always judge before you run out to keep judgment of the pure up. Use the Black Blood phase to regenerate your mana. It's a good time to use your mana cooldowns such as Divine Plea for Holy Paladins or Arcane Torrent if you're a Blood Elf. It's also a good time to use Mana Hymn from a priest or Innovate from a druid, and you have plenty of time to sit down and take a concentration potion. Okay, I think that's all the tips and information I've got for you. This fight is fairly easy for the tanks and the DPS, but a bit more stressful for the healers. Just heal everyone up before the crystal explosions and save your big rig cooldowns for the crystals. Wait for the stomp, run to the crystal, and then run back to the same position. In the Black Blood phase, just hide behind the pillars and regen your mana. As long as you time your raid cooldowns right, it shouldn't be too difficult. Thank you for listening and good luck with your raid!